What happens when a fearless woman dares to defy a feared Comanche chief on the edge of the frontier? One word from him changes everything in a way she never imagined. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The dust-laden wind swept across the plains of West Texas, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of a scorching summer day. It was 1875, and the once bustling frontier settlement of Willow Creek had grown into a proper town, complete with a general store, saloon, and newly constructed schoolhouse. Sarah Bennett stood on the porch of that schoolhouse, watching as her students scattered like quail after the final bell. At 26, Sarah had spent the last 3 years bringing education to this remote corner of the frontier, having traveled all the way from Boston with little more than determination and a trunk full of books. "Miss Bennett, look what I found." Young Tommy Williams held up a peculiar arrowhead, his freckled face beaming with pride. Sarah knelt down, examining the carved stone. "That's a fine specimen, Tommy. The craftsmanship is remarkable." She turned it over in her palm, tracing the sharp edges with her finger. "The Comanche are skilled artisans." "Pa says the Comanche are nothing but savages," Tommy replied matter-of-factly, repeating words he'd clearly heard around the dinner table. Sarah's expression tightened. "Your father is entitled to his opinion, but remember that people are complicated, Tommy. The Comanche have their own culture, their own ways. Different doesn't mean savage." After the children had gone, Sarah gathered her books and locked the schoolhouse door. The walk to her small cabin on the edge of town took her past the general store, where a crowd had gathered. Sheriff Davis's voice carried above the murmurs. "Now, folks, settle down. These are just rumors for now." "Rumors. 3 homesteads burned to the ground ain't rumors, Sheriff," shouted Jacob Miller, a rancher whose land bordered Comanche territory. "It's Quanah Parker and his warriors, mark my words." The name sent a ripple through the crowd. Quanah Parker, the fierce half-white, half-Comanche war chief, who had thus far refused to lead his people onto the reservations. His name had become synonymous with the last desperate resistance of the Comanche against the relentless tide of settlement. "We don't know that, Jacob," Sheriff Davis cautioned. "Could be rustlers using Indian raids as cover." Sarah paused at the edge of the crowd, catching the eye of Dr. William Hayes, who stood with arms crossed, his weathered face troubled. Unlike most in Willow Creek, Dr. Hayes had spent time among various tribes, learning their healing practices and developing a respect for their ways. "Evening, Miss Bennett," he nodded as she approached. "Troubling news, I'm afraid." "So I gather," Sarah replied. "What's actually happened?" "Farms burned about 20 miles north. Family managed to escape, but they're claiming it was Comanche raiders." He lowered his voice. "Problem is, I was treating a Comanche boy last week, brought in by his father who trusts me, and he mentioned that soldiers killed 3 of their hunters near the Red River. Stories never make it to town, of course." Sarah frowned. The endless cycle of vengeance. "Miss Bennett," Sheriff Davis called, noticing her presence. "A word, if you don't mind." As the crowd dispersed, the sheriff approached with Mayor Thompson beside him. The mayor was a portly man who had made his fortune in cattle before settling in Willow Creek. His ambitions now turned to politics, and perhaps even a run for state office someday. "Miss Bennett, given these troubling developments, the town council feels it would be prudent to suspend your frontier education program," Mayor Thompson said, his tone suggesting the decision was already made. "My what?" Sarah asked, genuinely confused. "Your visits to the neutral trading grounds. Teaching English to those Comanche children," the mayor clarified, disapproval evident in his voice. "It's inappropriate in these tense times." For the past 6 months, with Dr. Hayes' help as an intermediary, Sarah had been visiting a neutral trading ground where some peaceful Comanche families came to barter. She'd begun teaching basic English to their children, while they in turn taught her words in their language. It had been a small bridge across a vast cultural divide. "With respect, Mayor, abandoning peaceful interaction is exactly what we shouldn't do when tensions rise," Sarah replied firmly. "Those children and their mothers want no part in raiding." "It's not safe, Sarah," Sheriff Davis interjected, his concern genuine. "And folks in town are talking. They don't understand what you're doing out there. Perhaps they should try to understand before passing judgment," Sarah countered. Mayor Thompson's face reddened. The decision is made, Miss Bennett. As long as you're employed by this town to teach our children, you will refrain from consorting with the Comanche. Is that clear? Sarah felt her temper rising but kept her voice steady. Perfectly clear, Mayor Thompson. Now if you'll excuse me, I have lessons to prepare. As she walked away, her mind was already made up. The teaching sessions at the neutral grounds were scheduled for the day after tomorrow. Whatever the mayor and his council decided, Sarah Bennett would be there, as promised. In a land where promises were routinely broken, especially those made to the native peoples, she would keep hers. The sun was setting as she reached her cabin, painting the western sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. She lit her lamp and settled at her small table, but instead of reviewing arithmetic lessons for her students, she found herself staring at the Comanche phrasebook she had been compiling. The words were phonetic approximations, clumsy attempts to capture sounds so different from English. What would Boston think of you now, Sarah Bennett? She whispered to herself with a small smile, running her fingers over the pages filled with her neat handwriting. The answer was clear enough. They would be scandalized just as the townspeople were becoming. But out here on the frontier, with the stars blazing overhead in a manner they never seemed to in Massachusetts, Sarah had found something she hadn't expected, a conviction that the future of this land lay not in conquest, but in understanding. It was a conviction worth risking her position for, perhaps even worth risking her safety. As night deepened, she found herself hoping that the rumors were just that, rumors. But a feeling in her bones, honed by 3 years on the frontier, told her that trouble was coming to Willow Creek, as surely as the summer storm swept across the plains. And somehow she knew her path would cross with the legendary Quanah Parker before the season was through. 2 days later, Sarah guided her horse along the familiar trail to the neutral trading grounds. The morning air was cool, a temporary reprieve from the heat that would build as the day progressed. She had left before dawn, partly to avoid being seen defying the mayor's orders, but mostly to ensure she arrived at the appointed time. Her saddlebags contained simple primers, slate boards, and chalk, modest tools for the ambitious task of bridging 2 worlds. As she rode, Sarah rehearsed the Comanche greetings she had learned, determined to show respect by using their language whenever possible. The trading ground came into view, a flat, open area beside a small creek marked by a stand of cottonwood trees. Usually, there would be several Comanche families with their teepees erected nearby, but today the area seemed deserted. Sarah reined in her horse, a sense of unease creeping up her spine. "Hello," she called out, then tried the Comanche greeting she had practiced. "Ha, Maruawe." Only the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods answered her. Sarah dismounted, tethering her horse to a low branch. She moved cautiously toward the creek where she normally conducted her lessons. The ashes of previous cooking fires were cold, with no sign of recent activity. "They received word not to come?" a deep voice spoke behind her. Sarah spun around, her heart hammering. Standing not 20 feet away was a Comanche warrior, mounted on a magnificent paint horse. He wore buckskin leggings and a calico shirt, his long black hair braided and adorned with a single eagle feather. Most striking were his eyes, dark and penetrating, missing nothing. "You're Quanah Parker," Sarah said, the realization dawning on her. She had seen sketches in newspapers, heard countless descriptions, but they hadn't captured the commanding presence of the man. He inclined his head slightly. "And you are the teacher, the one who speaks to our children with respect." "Sarah Bennett," she replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "Where are the families who usually come here to trade?" "I sent them deeper into our territory," Quanah replied, his English precise but accented. "It is not safe for them here anymore." "Because of the raids?" Sarah asked directly. Quanah's expression hardened. "You speak of the farms that burned." "Yes, my warriors did not burn those farms," he stated flatly. "But your people will blame us anyway. They always do." Sarah studied him, trying to discern truth from fiction. She had heard that Quanah Parker never lied. It was a matter of honor for him. But she had also heard he was a brilliant strategist in both war and diplomacy. "If not your warriors, then who?" she asked. "There are renegades, Comanche who no longer follow any chief, and there are white men who dress as Indians to cover their crimes." Quanah guided his horse a few steps closer. "But that is not why I am here." Why are you here then? Sarah asked, acutely aware of her vulnerability, yet strangely unafraid. To give you warning, Quanah said. There is a sickness in our camp. Many children have fallen ill with fever. Our medicine is not working. Sarah's concern immediately shifted. What kind of fever? How long have they been sick? 3 days. The fever comes with spots on the skin and coughing. Quanah's stoic expression slipped momentarily, revealing genuine worry. 2 children have already died. It sounds like measles, Sarah said, her mind racing. Dr. Hayes would know better, but it matches the symptoms. Is that why you came? To ask for help? Quanah's pride visibly bristled. I came to warn you to stay away. The sickness could spread to your town. Or I could bring Dr. Hayes, Sarah countered. He respects your people and he's treated many cases of childhood diseases. Your town would never allow it, Quanah stated with certainty. They don't need to know, Sarah replied without hesitation. Where is your camp? Quanah studied her intently, as if trying to read her soul. You would defy your people to help mine? I would defy anyone to save children's lives, Sarah answered truthfully. After a long moment, Quanah nodded. The camp is 2 days' ride west in the canyon lands beyond Buffalo Creek. I will leave a guide for you and your medicine man tomorrow at dawn, here at the trading ground. We'll be here, Sarah promised. Quanah turned his horse to leave, but paused. The soldiers are hunting me, Miss Bennett. If they find you helping my people, they will call you a traitor. Let them, Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. A ghost of a smile touched Quanah's lips. You have a warrior's heart in a teacher's body. He raised his hand in farewell, and then was gone, galloping across the plain with the grace of someone born to the saddle. Sarah stood motionless for several minutes, processing what had just happened. She had just spoken with Quanah Parker, the most feared Comanche war chief on the frontier, and had committed to a dangerous journey to his hidden camp. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was madness, but her conscience was clear. Children were dying, and she had the means to help. The ride back to Willow Creek seemed longer than usual, her mind preoccupied with how to approach Dr. Hayes without alerting the town to their plan. As she stabled her horse at the livery, she noticed unusual activity in town. Horses being saddled, men checking rifles. What's happening? She asked Thomas, the livery owner. Army patrol rode in half an hour ago, Thomas replied as he took the reins of her horse. Lieutenant says they're tracking a Comanche war party headed by Quanah Parker himself. Mayor's organizing a volunteer militia to join the search. Sarah's blood ran cold. A militia? These men aren't soldiers. They're men protecting their homes, Miss Bennett, Thomas replied with a touch of defensiveness. The lieutenant said they found signs that Parker himself has been scouting the area, even crossed the creek just north of town. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. I see. Thank you, Thomas. She hurried toward Dr. Hayes's office, her mind working furiously. The situation had just become infinitely more complicated. Not only would she and the doctor have to slip away unnoticed, but they would be potentially crossing paths with an army patrol, actively hunting for Quanah Parker. Dr. Hayes was cleaning instruments when she entered his office, his expression grim. I assume you've heard about our visitors, he said without preamble. Just now, Sarah replied, closing the door behind her. But I have something more urgent to discuss. I need your help, and it involves significant risk. The doctor put down his tools and gave her his full attention as she recounted her meeting with Quanah Parker and the sickness afflicting the Comanche children. Measles, Dr. Hayes nodded when she described the symptoms. It would spread like wildfire through a camp with no prior immunity. And you're right. Without proper care, the mortality rate could be devastating. So you'll come with me? Sarah asked. Dr. Hayes ran a hand through his graying hair. Sarah, do you understand what you're asking? This isn't just about defying the mayor or even the army. If we're caught, we could be charged with aiding hostiles. That's treason. I understand, she said quietly. But I also understand that children are dying needlessly. Isn't your oath to heal the sick regardless of who they are? The doctor sighed heavily. Below the belt, Sarah. He was quiet for a long moment then. I'll need to gather supplies. Medicines, blankets, food. We can't leave until after dark, and we'll need a cover story for our absence. Relief washed over her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dr. Hayes warned. This is the most foolhardy thing I've ever agreed to, and I once performed surgery in the middle of an Apache attack. Despite his words, there was a gleam of determination in his eyes. Meet me at the creek crossing north of town at midnight. Bring only what you can carry on horseback and wear dark clothing. As Sarah left the doctor's office, the weight of her decision pressed upon her. She was risking everything, her position, her reputation, possibly even her life, for people whom most of the town considered enemies. Yet as she watched the men gathering in the street, checking weapons and talking of teaching the savages a lesson, she knew with bone-deep certainty that she was making the right choice. That night, as she packed a small bag with essentials, Sarah penned a letter and left it on her table, addressed to Sheriff Davis. If things went wrong, at least he would know that she had acted of her own free will, and perhaps he might even understand her reasons. With a silent prayer for courage, she slipped out into the darkness, a schoolteacher turned conspirator under the vast Texas sky. The journey west was arduous, their path deliberately winding to avoid army patrols and the volunteer militia. Their Comanche guide, a young warrior who introduced himself as Swift Fox, led them through hidden valleys and across dry creek beds, following trails invisible to untrained eyes. They traveled mainly at night and rested during the heat of the day, hidden in whatever scant shade they could find. Sarah's body ached from hours in the saddle, unused to such prolonged riding. Dr. Hayes, despite being nearly 30 years her senior, showed remarkable stamina, though she occasionally caught him wincing as he dismounted. The lieutenant mentioned searching the canyons near Buffalo Creek, Dr. Hayes said during their second evening as they made camp in a sheltered draw. That's precisely where we're headed. Swift Fox, who had been tending the small smokeless fire, looked up. Soldiers slow, we faster. His English was limited but clear. 2 more hours riding, then camp safe. Sarah nodded, stretching her stiff muscles. How many children are sick, Swift Fox? The young warrior's face clouded. 17 now, 3 dead. He touched his chest. My sister's son very sick. Dr. Hayes unpacked his medical bag, checking his supplies for the 100th time. I brought as much quinine and willow bark as I could gather, but for measles, the best treatments are simple. Clean water, cool compresses for the fever, honey for the cough. The Comanche have their own medicine, Sarah observed. Will they accept your help? Some will, some won't, Dr. Hayes replied pragmatically. I've worked with tribes before. The key is respect, offering help without dismissing their ways. Swift Fox nodded in approval. You good medicine man. Chief Quanah say you understand. They set out again before dawn, the landscape gradually changing from rolling plains to more rugged terrain. Mesas rose in the distance and the vegetation grew sparser, dominated by scrub and cacti. By mid-morning, Swift Fox guided them into a narrow canyon, its walls rising steeply on either side. Stay close, he cautioned. Path narrow. The trail twisted through the canyon, sometimes barely wide enough for the horses to pass single file. After nearly an hour of careful navigation, the canyon widened suddenly into a hidden valley. There, nestled against the far wall, was the Comanche camp, a collection of perhaps 30 teepees arranged in a semicircle, with horses grazing in a natural corral formed by the valley walls. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Warriors immediately moved to intercept them, weapons ready. Swift Fox raised his hand in greeting and called out in Comanche. After a brief exchange, they were allowed to proceed into the camp, though under the watchful eyes of the warriors. Women and children emerged from the teepees to observe the strangers, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Sarah noticed that many of the children bore the telltale rash of measles, their small bodies clearly weakened by fever. At the center of the camp stood a larger teepee, elaborately painted with symbols Sarah didn't recognize. From this emerged Quanah Parker, dressed now in full ceremonial attire, his presence commanding immediate respect. You came, he stated simply, his eyes moving from Sarah to Dr. Hayes. We gave our word, Sarah replied. Quanah nodded, then addressed Dr. Hayes. Our medicine man, White Wolf, has tried his healing ways. Now we will try yours. Dr. Hayes dismounted, his professional demeanor taking over. I'll need clean water, fire, and a place to examine the children. and I'll need to speak with your medicine man to understand what treatments have already been attempted. Quanah gave instructions to several women, who hurried to comply. Then he turned back to Sarah. The soldiers are near. A patrol crossed Buffalo Creek yesterday. We were careful, Sarah assured him. Not careful enough, Quanah replied grimly. There is dust on the horizon. Riders coming from the east. Sarah felt her stomach drop. How many? 6, maybe 8. Too many to be hunters. Dr. Hayes had already begun organizing his supplies. We need to work quickly. The sickest children first. And if the soldiers come? Sarah asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. Quanah's expression hardened. Then we fight. No, Sarah said firmly, surprising even herself with her boldness. If they come, I will speak to them. This is a matter of sick children, not war. They will not listen to a woman, Quanah stated. They might listen to a schoolteacher from their own town, Sarah countered. Violence will only bring more violence. Hasn't there been enough? Quanah studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Finally, he gave a slight nod. We will try your way first, but I will protect my people if necessary. With that, he led them to a teepee where several of the sickest children lay on buffalo robes, their small bodies burning with fever. Dr. Hayes immediately set to work, his experienced hands gentle as he examined each child. Sarah assisted, preparing cool compresses and helping to administer medicine. The Comanche medicine man, White Wolf, observed their work with a mixture of skepticism and hope. He was an elderly man with deep lines etched into his face, his long hair completely white. After watching for some time, he began to work alongside Dr. Hayes, the two healers finding a wordless understanding, despite their vastly different approaches. Hours passed as they moved from teepee to teepee, treating as many of the sick children as they could. Sarah lost track of time, focused entirely on the task at hand. The Comanche women, initially wary, began to assist, following Dr. Hayes's instructions for continuing care. It was late afternoon when a young warrior burst into the teepee where they were working, speaking rapidly to Quanah in Comanche. Quanah's expression grew grave. The soldiers have found our trail, he informed them. They will be here within the hour. Dr. Hayes looked up from the child he was treating. We need more time. Some of these children are still critical. How many soldiers? Sarah asked. 8 riders, Quanah replied. With our warriors, we could defeat them, but more would come. Sarah made a decision. Let me ride out to meet them. Perhaps I can convince them that this is a peaceful mission. They will arrest you, Dr. Hayes warned. Perhaps, but it might prevent bloodshed. She turned to Quanah. If I can delay them, will you evacuate the camp? Quanah shook his head. Moving the sick children now could kill them. Then we need another solution, Sarah insisted. One that doesn't end with dead soldiers or Comanche. Quanah was silent for a moment, his mind clearly working through possibilities. There is another way out of the valley. A path too narrow for horses, but our people could travel it on foot. We would have to leave the teepees and most of our belongings. Do it, Sarah urged. Get the women and children to safety. Leave a few warriors to help with the sick children, only those too ill to be moved. And what of you and the doctor? Quanah asked. We'll stay with the sick children, Dr. Hayes answered before Sarah could speak. As healers tending to patients, even soldiers must respect that. Quanah considered this plan, then nodded slowly. I will send the healthy children and most of the women through the hidden path. Warriors will help carry those who can be moved. White Wolf and some women will stay with the sickest children. He fixed Sarah with an intense gaze. And I will stay as well. That's too dangerous, Sarah protested. You're the one they want most of all. This is my decision, Quanah stated with finality. A chief does not abandon his people. The camp erupted into controlled activity. Women quickly gathered essential items. Warriors prepared to escort the evacuees, and those chosen to remain helped consolidate the sickest children into 2 teepees for easier treatment. Sarah found herself working alongside a Comanche woman named Morning Star, whose own child was among the sick. Despite the language barrier, they developed an efficient rhythm, communicating through gestures and the few Comanche words Sarah knew. As the majority of the camp slipped away through a nearly invisible crevice in the canyon wall, Sarah stepped outside to catch her breath. The sun was beginning to set, painting the canyon walls in brilliant orange and deep purple. It would have been beautiful if not for the imminent arrival of the soldiers. She felt a presence beside her and turned to find Quanah Parker, his face stoic as he surveyed what remained of his camp. 5 teepees, a handful of warriors, several women including Morning Star, White Wolf, Dr. Hayes, and about a dozen critically ill children. "Your people value courage," Quanah remarked unexpectedly. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "So do mine," he continued. "But we define it differently. For your people, courage often means conquering fear to fight. For mine, sometimes courage means choosing not to fight when you could." Sarah considered his words. "There's wisdom in that. There is wisdom in what you are doing as well," Quanah acknowledged. "Risking everything for children not your own." "They're just children," Sarah said simply. "Their heritage doesn't matter when they're suffering." Quanah nodded, a rare smile briefly softening his features. "In another world, Sarah Bennett, we might have been friends." "In this world," Sarah replied, "perhaps we still can be." Their conversation was interrupted by a distant sound, hoofbeats approaching the canyon entrance. Quanah's expression immediately hardened again, his hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. "It is time to see if your way works, teacher," he said grimly. "For all our sakes, I hope it does." As the soldiers' approach grew louder, Sarah steeled herself for the confrontation to come. She had no authority, no weapons, nothing but her convictions and her voice. Yet somehow, standing beside the legendary Comanche chief in the fading light, she found the courage to face whatever came next. The soldiers entered the canyon cautiously, rifles ready as they approached the remnants of the camp. Sarah recognized Lieutenant James Wilson leading the patrol, a career military man with a reputation for fairness, but unwavering duty. Beside him rode a familiar figure that made her heart sink, Sheriff Davis from Willow Creek. "Stay back," Sarah murmured to Quanah. "Let me speak first." She walked forward, hands raised to show she carried no weapon. The soldiers immediately trained their rifles on her, then on the small group behind her. "Miss Bennett?" Lieutenant Wilson called in disbelief as he recognized her. "Stand aside, ma'am. You're in the company of hostiles." "Lieutenant Wilson," she replied, keeping her voice calm and clear. "I'm here voluntarily, assisting Dr. Hayes with a medical emergency. These children have measles, and several have already died." Sheriff Davis nudged his horse forward. "Sarah, what in God's name are you doing? Do you have any idea who that is behind you?" "I know exactly who he is, Sheriff," she answered steadily. "And right now, he's a father watching his people's children die from a disease they have no immunity against." Lieutenant Wilson's eyes narrowed as he spotted Quanah. "That's Quanah Parker. I have orders to bring him in, dead or alive. And I have patients who will die without continued care." Dr. Hayes interjected, stepping forward to stand beside Sarah. "Lieutenant, I've taken an oath to preserve life. These children need at least another day of treatment before they can be moved." The lieutenant dismounted, signaling his men to keep their rifles ready. "You're both in a heap of trouble. Consorting with hostiles is a hanging offense in these parts. Then hang me after the children are safe," Sarah challenged. "If you have any humanity, Lieutenant, you'll give us the time we need." Sheriff Davis dismounted as well, approaching more cautiously. "Where are the rest of them? This can't be the entire camp." "Gone," Quanah spoke, his deep voice carrying across the space between them. "Only the sick remain, and those who care for them." The lieutenant's hand moved to his sidearm. "You expect me to believe that the great Quanah Parker stayed behind while his warriors fled? Take me for a fool." "A chief protects his people," Quanah replied simply. "The children could not all be moved." Morning Star emerged from one of the teepees, carrying a small child wrapped in blankets despite the heat. The child's breathing was labored, his small face covered with the measles rash. "This one very sick," she said in halting English. "Please help." Sarah saw the conflict on the lieutenant's face as he looked at the suffering child. Even the hardened soldiers shifted uncomfortably. "You have your duty, Lieutenant," Sarah acknowledged. "But surely that duty doesn't include endangering sick children. Give us until tomorrow morning. Then we'll go with you peacefully, all of us." Sheriff Davis stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sarah, you don't speak for Parker. He's been raiding settlements all across the territory." "Not my warriors," Quanah stated firmly. Not these farms. You expect us to believe that? One of the soldiers scoffed. Dr. Hayes straightened, his normally gentle demeanor hardening. I've treated both settlers and natives for over 20 years on this frontier. I've seen the aftermath of Comanche raids, and I've seen what happens when settlers or outlaws disguise their crimes as Indian attacks. The farms that were burned, there were no scalped victims, no typical Comanche raid patterns. Lieutenant Wilson considered this. That's speculation, Doctor. I give my word, Quanah said. My warriors did not attack those farms. The word of a savage? Another soldier muttered. Sarah's patience snapped. That savage stayed behind with his sick and dying children when he could have fled or fought. He's shown more honor today than anyone who would deny medicine to suffering children, regardless of their heritage. Her outburst created a moment of stunned silence. Then unexpectedly, Sheriff Davis laughed, a short, surprised sound. You always did have more spirit than sense, Miss Bennett, he said, though there was a hint of admiration in his tone. He turned to Lieutenant Wilson. I've known this woman for 3 years. Stubborn as they come, but honest to a fault. If she says they're just here for the children, I'm inclined to believe her. Lieutenant Wilson removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow as he weighed his options. I have orders, Sheriff. And those orders include capturing women and a doctor providing medical care? Sarah pressed. Taking dying children prisoner? From inside one of the teepees came the sound of a child coughing violently, followed by a mother's soothing murmurs. The sound seemed to affect the lieutenant more than any argument could. One night, he finally conceded. We'll camp at the canyon entrance. At dawn, anyone well enough to travel comes with us to Fort Richardson. The rest, he glanced at the tippies. The rest can follow when they're able, under military escort. And Quanah Parker? Sheriff Davis asked. The lieutenant's expression hardened again. My orders stand. He comes with us at dawn. Quanah stepped forward, his bearing regal despite the circumstances. I will go willingly if you allow the doctor to stay until all children are well. Lieutenant Wilson studied the Comanche chief with undisguised surprise. You'd surrender yourself? For my people's children, yes, Quanah affirmed. Sarah felt a lump forming in her throat at the nobility of the gesture. Lieutenant, surely there's another way. The government has been trying to negotiate with the Comanche. This could be a start, a gesture of good faith on both sides. I don't make policy, Miss Bennett, the lieutenant replied, though his tone had softened slightly. I follow orders. Then follow them with wisdom, Dr. Hayes suggested. Think of the story you could bring back, not just capturing Quanah Parker, but arranging a peaceful solution that saved lives on both sides. Lieutenant Wilson considered this for a long moment. I'll need to confer with my men. Sheriff, keep an eye on things here. He motioned for his soldiers to join him a distance away. As the military men huddled in discussion, Sheriff Davis approached Sarah more closely. You left a letter, he said quietly. Found it when we searched your cabin after you disappeared. I didn't want you to think I'd been taken against my will, Sarah explained. That was thoughtful, considering you were committing treason, the sheriff remarked dryly. Is it treason to save children's lives? Sarah challenged. Sheriff Davis glanced at the teepees where the sick children lay. No, he admitted. But there are proper channels, Sarah. You could have come to me. Would you have helped? She asked pointedly. The sheriff's silence was answer enough. I made a choice, Sarah continued, and I'd make it again. After what seemed an eternity, Lieutenant Wilson returned. His face was inscrutable as he addressed them all. Here are my terms, he announced. Dr. Hayes may stay with 2 of my men to continue treating the children. Miss Bennett, Sheriff Davis will escort you back to Willow Creek immediately. He turned to Quanah. As for you, Chief Parker, I propose a temporary truce. You will come with me to Fort Richardson, not as a prisoner, but as a representative of your people to discuss these raids and possible peace terms. Quanah's expression revealed nothing. And my people here will remain undisturbed as long as they make no hostile moves, the lieutenant promised. When the children are well, they'll be allowed to rejoin your band, assuming our talks are productive. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. It wasn't perfect, but it was far better than she had dared hope for. Why this change of heart, Lieutenant? She couldn't help asking. Lieutenant Wilson straightened his uniform jacket. Contrary to what you might think, Miss Bennett, I have no desire to be remembered as the man who arrested women and doctors for helping sick children, nor do I wish to be known for causing the deaths of innocent Comanche young ones. He glanced at his men. Besides, Private Jenkins here has a Choctaw grandmother. He made some persuasive arguments. A young soldier nodded almost imperceptibly, his features indeed suggesting mixed heritage. Do we have an agreement? The lieutenant asked, looking directly at Quanah. The Comanche chief was silent for several heartbeats, his dark eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. Finally, he nodded once. We have an agreement. But I will need your word as a soldier, and a man that no harm will come to my people here. You have it, Lieutenant Wilson replied firmly. As the arrangements were finalized, Sarah found herself standing beside Quanah Parker one last time. The sun had set, and the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue of the sky. You were right, Quanah said softly. Your way prevented bloodshed today, and your willingness to negotiate may save many more lives in the future, Sarah replied. The world is changing, Quanah observed, his gaze on the distant horizon. My people must find a new path or perish. It doesn't have to be surrender, Sarah offered. It can be adaptation. Your strength, your culture, those don't have to die. Quanah turned to her, something like respect in his eyes. You understand more than most of your kind, teacher. He reached into a small pouch at his belt and withdrew a simple leather bracelet decorated with intricate beadwork. For your courage, he said, holding it out to her. Sarah accepted the gift, touched by the gesture. I'll treasure it. Tell your children about this day, Quanah said. Tell them that enemies can speak instead of fight. Tell them that Quanah Parker was not just a warrior, but a father who loved his children. I will, Sarah promised, her voice thick with emotion. And I'll continue teaching any who wish to learn, Comanche or settler. As Sheriff Davis approached to inform her it was time to leave, Sarah realized that something profound had shifted in her understanding of the frontier and its future. The path forward would not be easy for anyone. Not for the Comanche fighting to preserve their way of life. Not for the settlers pushing westward. Not for those like herself caught between worlds. But in this hidden canyon, where enemies had chosen words over weapons, she had glimpsed a possibility that gave her hope. It was a small beginning, perhaps, but beginnings were what teachers specialized in. The first tentative steps toward understanding, toward a world where differences could be bridges rather than barriers. Sheriff Davis helped her mount her horse. Ready to face the music back in Willow Creek? He asked. The mayor's likely to fire you on the spot. Sarah smiled, touching the bracelet now on her wrist. Then I'll just have to open my own school. One that teaches reading, writing, arithmetic, and understanding. As they rode away, she glanced back one last time. Quanah Parker stood tall against the darkening sky, a silhouette that seemed to embody both the proud past of his people and the uncertain future they faced. He raised his hand in farewell, and Sarah returned the gesture, carrying with her the memory of a chief who had silenced her not with force, but with the unexpected eloquence of his wisdom. In the years that followed, as the frontier gradually transformed into settlements and reservations, Sarah Bennett would keep her promise. She would tell the story of that day in the canyon, of children saved by cooperation rather than lost to conflict, of a fierce warrior who chose peace for the sake of the future. And though the path of history would not always follow the one glimpsed briefly